Let's Talk Sexuality. Hello and welcome to the podcast Let's Talk Sexuality by Tathapi Trust, the podcast that brings to you stories on relationship and sexuality.
Hi, it's Peter from the Storytellers. Do you like listening to stories? Well, today's story is Bayen by Mahashweta Devi. Mahashweta Devi was a Bengal fiction writer and social activist. Her notable literary works include Hajar, Chaurashir Mao, Rudali, and Aryanyar Adhikar. She worked for the rights and empowerment of the tribal people of West Bengal, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh. She has been honored with various literary awards. This story version has been translated from Bangla by Mahua Bhattacharya, and it's from a collection of stories by Katha Pocket Books. Bayen has also been adapted for stage production. Our storyteller today is Mary. Hi Mary, and thank you for being with us.
Hi Peter. Happy to be here.
Why have you chosen this story, Mary?
It's riveting. Once you start reading, you can't keep it down.
Okay, let us hear the story now.
Chandi's full name was Chandidasi Gangadasi. She was a descendant of the great Kaludom. She used to bury children. She belonged to a community of cremation attendants, men and women who cremated the dead on the bank of the Ganga. The job of attending to the dead was inherited. If a child died before the age of 5 years, the body had to be buried instead of being cremated. Chandi's father, Gangaputra, used to dig the graves and spread thorns to prevent the dead from marauding jackals. Every Saturday, Chandi's father would go around the village carrying a thali in his hand. "I am your servant," he would call out. "I am Gangaputra. May I have my rations, please?" The villagers would silently fill his thali and go away as they were afraid of him. One day, a fair girl with light eyes and reddish hair came instead of him. "I am Chandi," she announced, "daughter of Gangaputra. My father is dead. Give me his rations." "Will you do your father's work then?" they asked. "Yes." This was the Chandi that Melinda had married. Bhagirath, a son, was born within the year. Everyone knew that Melinda loved his wife dearly. He would buy her saris and silver jewelry to wear. In the Dom community, Melinda was the only one who knew how to sign his name. At the primary school, the other students kept skipping classes. He alone stayed long enough with the program to learn. Because of this, he landed a government job. He had a job at the sub-divisional morgue. He went to work wearing a shirt, trousers, and shoes. He was well respected in the community. Since his marriage, he had built a new hut and had 2 bighas of land for sharecropping. The village was envious, and Melinda knew that the village was envious. One day, Chandi came home crying. Bhagirath was in her arms. "They stoned me today. They say I'm evil. I do not have a heart to pick up the spade to bury the dead anymore. But it is God's will. What can I do?" How could Chandi reject the traditional occupation? Dare she? Would God wreak his wrath on her? Chandi's fear and unease would remain long after the grave was well covered with prickly bushes. She was constantly worried that the fire-mouthed jackal might come in and start digging away with large paws to get to the body inside. After every burial of a child, Chandi would weep softly and rush home. She would light a lamp and sit praying beside her son Bhagirath. She prayed for her child and for every child in the village, that they would live forever. It was at this time that Chandi spoke to the village elders. "Respected ones, get hold of someone else for this work," she said. "I am not fit for this anymore." No one listened, not even her husband Malinder. When she cried bitterly, even Malinder scoffed. Around this time, Malinder's sister had come for a visit with her daughter Tukni. Tukni was devoted to Chandni. They would spend the greater part of the day with each other. At that time, the village was suffering from a severe attack of smallpox. Tukni fell ill. Malinder's sister decided to take Tukni to pay homage to goddess Shitala and seek health and well-being for Tukni. Chandi accompanied them. A few days later, Tukni died. Everyone, even the girl's parents, blamed the death on Chandi. "What? Me? Who else?" they asked. "Never," she thundered. "I swear upon the head of my own child that I have never wished any ill on Tukni or any other child. You know my lineage." Suddenly, those people, those craven, superstitious people, lowered their eyes. "What about the milk that spilled out of your breasts as you were piling earth on Tukni's grave?" "Oh, the fools that you are! I do not care if the rage of my forefathers descends upon me. I quit this job from this very day." Silencing every voice, she went back home. She asked Malinder to get a room near his new place of work. "Let us go there. Do you know what they call me?" It was just to calm her down, to pacify her with a joke, that he said with a loud laugh, "And what do they call you, a Bayen?" Chandi clutched at the wooden pillar that supported the roof of their home. Rage and sorrow made her scream at him. "How could you utter that word? You with a son of your own? Me? A Bayen?" "Shut up!" Malinder shouted. Chandi's anguished cry traveled far and wide on raven's wings, through the hot winds that reached every nook and corner of the village. For a few days, Chandi just sat dazed. She went inside the house and often sat with Bhagirath in her arms singing. She burnt a lot of incense and lit lamps. Over time, Chandi became whole again. "There ought to be some other arrangement for dead children," she would say. "The present one is horrible. How am I to know if I did the right thing? Sometimes at night I can hear my father call, just as he used to, as if he were chasing the jackals off the graves." Some nights Chandi woke up with a start, hearing cries of dead children from their graves. Fear grew in Malinder. Perhaps Chandi was slowly changing into a witch. Meanwhile, the community was keeping a watch on her, to her complete ignorance. One stormy night, when Malinder was asleep in drunken slumber, his courtyard filled with people. "Come and see for yourself whether your wife is a Bayen or not," they called out. Malinder went out. The burial ground under the banyan tree was lit with lamps. There she was, a sickle in her hand, a lantern burning beside her, a heap of thorn bushes stacking on one side. Why did you come out?" "I was trying to cover the holes." The jackals had suddenly stopped their cries, and something in me said, "They are there, right at the holes, pawing for the bodies." "You are a Bayen," the villagers raised their chants. "There is no one to watch over the dead. You are a Bayen," they said again. "It's the job of my forefathers," she said. "You are a Bayen," they said. No, I'm not a Bayen. I have a son of my own. My breasts are heavy with milk for him. I'm not a Bayen. Why, Gangaputra, why don't you tell them?" Malinda stared as if in a trance, his mind seared with pain. Something whispered within him, "Do not go near Malinda. Go near a snake if you will, a fire even, but not her, though you may have loved her." He let out a yell like a beast and said, "A Bayen you are!" Oh my God! Malinda rushed to get the drum that had belonged to his father-in-law. He shouted as he beat his drum, "I, Malinda, hereby declare that my wife is a Bayen." As a Bayen, Chandi was put in a hut by the railside. She lived as a Paraya outside the village. A Bayen is not an ordinary witch. An ordinary witch can be killed. No one would come to any harm. If you killed a Bayen, it would mean certain death for your children. So, the village kept her alive. Every Saturday, someone from the community of the village went to the tree with a week's provision. 1/2 kilogram of rice, a handful of pulses, oil, salt and other food. A Bayen shouldn't eat too much. Calling on a tree to bear witness, the person would leave the basket there and run away as fast as he could. She would go to the pond to collect her water. In the flaming noon of April, the red-clad figure with a dog trailing behind her, clanking a piece of tin across the paddy fields, she could be seen going to the pond. A Bayen had to warn people of her approach. If she cast her eye on a young man or a boy, she could suck the blood out of him, and so the clanking of a tin. A Bayen lives alone and sees no one. Bhagirath had been told that he did not have a mother. He was now a regular student at the village primary school. One day, and only on one day, Bhagirath saw his father Malinda talk to the Bayen. "Look away, my son," ordered his father. Bhagirath caught the reflection of the red-clad figure in the pond, her sun-bronzed face framed by wild matted hair and eyes that silently devoured him. No, the Bayen did not look at him directly. She looked at his image. He saw her in the dark waters. Shuddering violently, he closed his eyes and clung to his father. "What made you come here?" hissed the father at her. "There's no oil for my hair, Gangaputra. No kerosene at home. I'm afraid to be alone." She was crying. In the waters of the pond, her eyes seemed to swim in tears. "Did they not send you your week's ration on Saturday? The dogs took it all. Do you need some money? Who will sell me anything?" "Well, okay, I'll buy the things and leave them by the tree. Now go away." I can't live alone." "Who asked you to be a Bayen then? Go away." He picked up a handful of stones from the pond side. "Gangaputra, this boy," with an ugly oath, he threw the stones at her. The Bayen ran away. After Chandi left, Malinda covered his face with his hands and cried bitterly. How could I do it? It used to be a body as soft as butter. How could I be such a beast? You talked to her, Baba. So, Bhagirath was terrified. To talk to the Bayen meant certain death. The thought of his father dying scared him. He was sure that his stepmother would throw him out then. Malinda said, his voice growing somber, "She may be a Bayen now, but she used to be your mother once." A Bayen for a mother? Is a Bayen a human being then? Hadn't he heard that Bayen raise dead children from the earth, hug and nurse them? Whole trees dry up the instant a Bayen looks at them. He, a boy who's alive, born of a Bayen's womb? She used to be a woman, your mother, Malinda sighed. It was bad luck, hers, yours and mine. Once a Bayen, she is no longer human. So, I have told you, you don't have a mother. Bhagirath stared at his father. They walked back along the mud culvert. She had everything when she was your mother and my wife. I gave her saris and silver jewelry. I rubbed oil in her hair, her body. She used to be so afraid of the dark. He muttered, did fate have to make a Bayen out of her son? Who makes a Bayen, Baba? God. Bayens are reported to be crafty. If a Bayen was keen on having some child, a Bayen would walk close by, not seen to mortals. She would cast the shadow of her veil on the child, and he or she would die, and the Bayen would feign innocence. What is there for you to fear, my son? Malinda said. She will never harm you. Everyone knew that Malinda had loved his first wife deeply. Perhaps it was that love which prompted him to tell his son everything about Chandi. One day they were walking along the railway tracks. Let's sit here a while under this tree, he told his son. Bhagirath asked, this is the place the robbers go by, isn't it? In those days, the evening trains that passed through were frequently robbed. The robbers came in all shapes and sizes. At a predetermined place and time, they would pull the emergency chain and make the train stop in the darkness. The accomplices would rush in from the fields. They would loot and even kill before disappearing. The banyan tree was their favorite haunt after dark. Malinda was not thinking about robbers. My son, he said, why should you not know what everyone knows about your mother? He told Bhagirath of when he first met the beautiful Chandi. Malinda told Bhagirath of the traditional occupation that Chandi had inherited. How Chandi was fearful and uneasy because of the jackals. They might steal in and start digging away with large paws to get at the body inside. Chandi, he said, would weep softly and rush home. She would light a lamp and she would pray. She prayed for every child in the village, that each should live forever. Malinda also told Bhagirath how Chandi was uneasy with the job, but no one listened to her request for her to stop doing the burial work. He told him of Tukni's visit and death. And then he told him of Chandi being thrown out of the village as a Bayen. A few days later, Bhagirath heard the sound of the tin. He rushed to the pond at noon. The shadow of the Bayen trembled in the water. She was not looking at him. Her eyes were lowered. She was filling a pitcher. Bhagirath asked, "Don't you have another sari? Would you like a sari that is not as torn as this one? Would you like my dhoti?" The Bayen was silent. "Would you like some nice clothes?" The son of Gangaputra had better go home. "This is the time I go to school. I am a Bayen. Even my shadow is evil. Does not the son of Gangaputra know that? I'm not afraid. It is high noon. Young children shouldn't be out in the heat." Bhagirath asked, "Are you not afraid to live alone?" "Afraid? No, I'm not afraid of anything." "Then what makes you cry?" "Me? Cry? I have heard you," Bhagirath said. Her crimson shadow trembled in the water. Her voice was cracked as she said, "Let the son of Gangaputra go home and swear never to come near the Bayen, or I will tell Malinder about it." Bhagirath saw her turn her back and race along the mud culvert, her hair swirling about her, her crimson cloth fluttering in the air. Bhagirath sat alone for a long time by the pond, till the waters became still again. On her part, the Bayen sat in silence in her hut. A long while later, she raised herself, drew out a broken piece of mirror. She looked at herself. "I'm only a shadow of myself." She tried to run a comb through her hair. It was impossibly matted. Why did the child ask about nice clothes? How could he remember? She frowned hard in an attempt to collect her thoughts. It had been a long time she had thought about anything. Nothing was left in her mind but the rustling of the leaves, the whistling of the winds, and the rattling of the trains, sounds that had muddled her thoughts. She rose, she lit the lantern and hurried along the railway tracks to tell Malinder to protect Bhagirath from the witch's eyes. Malinder, on his way back from work, would turn here to take the mud culvert. She raised the lantern. As she walked towards the mud culvert, she saw them. They were doing some work on the tracks. No, they were piling up the bamboo. The 5-up Lalgola passenger train was due that evening with Wednesday's mailbag. It meant a lot of money. They had been waiting for the loot for a long time. She raised the lantern and swung it near her face. The men looked up startled. She had never seen the people of her community so frightened before. "It is the Bayen! You are piling bamboos? You would rob the train? What? Running away from me? Throw away these sticks first, or you are done for." They could not undo what they had done. The rain lashed on her as she picked up the lantern. What should she do? If she were really a witch, dark supernatural powers would do her bidding and stop the train. What could she do now? Chandi started running along the tracks toward the train, waving at it wildly. "Don't come any further! There is a heap of bamboo piled ahead." She continued to scream till the roar of the train drowned her voice and the train's light swallowed her up. Chandi's name spread far and wide for her heroic self-sacrifice that had prevented a major train disaster. Even people in the government came to hear of it. When her body left the morgue, the officer in charge, accompanied by the block development officer, came to Malinda's house. The railway is to announce a medal for Chandi Gangadasi Malinder. I know she used to live alone, but there must be someone to receive it on her behalf. Everyone is full of praise. She was your wife, wasn't she? Everyone was silent. People looked at one another, scratched their necks in embarrassment, and looked down. Someone whispered, "Yes, sir, she was one of us." This statement astonished Bhagirath. They were recognizing her at last. The government cannot give the award to the whole community. "I'll receive it, sir," Bhagirath said. "And who are you?" "She was my mother." "Mother?" "Yes, sir. My name is Bhagirath Gangaputra. My father is Malandar Gangaputra. My mother, the late Chandidasi Kangadasi." Bhagirath broke into loud sobs. "My mother, she was never a Bayen. My mother." There was a sense of suffocation and an uncomfortable silence.
Mary, I find this story unsettling on various levels.
I think Mahashweta Devi intended for this to be very unsettling. I feel she speaks the truth powerfully.
What would be the core issue in this story for you?
Perhaps there are two. In a chauvinistic society such as ours, it is very easy to hurt a woman, and women are hurt. The second one is how clever mob jealousy is in masking itself.
Could you tell our listeners if you have any personal experience of the situation that this story speaks to us about?
Well, if you look carefully, there is a perpetrator and a victim. As a perpetrator, I can see myself very often judging people and putting people into a box where I can live in my illusion of superiority. And another story that came to mind when you asked this question is when I was working in the villages, in donor circles. When I was engaged in development work, our organization was seen as a pariah and not worth funding for totally trumped up reasons.
And finally, who needs to hear the story?
Oh, I'd love everybody to hear this. Those who hold world views that are divisive. People who are dismissive of and aggressive to any human being. But they might not hear it. They might dismiss it.
Thank you, Mary. And that's our story for today. Before I go, I want to thank Mahashweta Devi for the story. And thank you too for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story and do join us for our next podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by Tathapi Trust Pune, a women and health organization. Be sure to give us your comments and suggestions for stories you want to hear on letstalksexuality.com. Stay healthy, stay safe, and have fun.